vote is that both Putin, Xi, and the American establishment understands the game that we're playing.
Okay, so that's the big non-tech news for today. China sends warships and jets close to Taiwan and sparks alert in Japan. They sent drones over near to Japan, a little too close for Japan's comfort, so Japan scrambled to deal with that. And they're just, kind of making the U.S.'s point that they're the aggressor, kind of falling into what I think the U.S.'s trap in a way, helping confirm the U.S.'s narrative that China's the bad guy here. So anyway, that's your non-tech news today. So the big tech news, are we ready to get into that, or unless somebody else has a burning non-tech news headline they want to jump on today?
Well, Tesla's big shareholder meeting was yesterday. I
Huh?
don't know whether tech or non-tech, but then it was amazing in terms of the numbers, and also that Tesla built their 3 millionth car feet, and how the money graph was exponentially going upwards. And there were a couple of suggestions uh, for voting in terms of how people wanted the company to take actions against few things which are allegedly there but not proven yet. And after the shareholders' questions, Elon also mentioned, because I watched the whole thing, to be very, looking forward for a surprise for the AI Day, which is coming in September.
Okay, so I'm ready for the tech news. Is everybody else
I
ready?
just in college, Ken. I just have one thing that's kind of halfway tech, halfway not. It's really
Huh.
more media, but Warner Brothers Discovery, which is the combination of Warner Brothers Studio and Discovery, that they merged together. They had their conference call and earnings yesterday, and the kind of I'll get to the net really the non-financial news is probably interesting to people. They're going to be merging their streaming services, which I think was expected, but they formalized it yesterday. So HBO Max and Discovery Plus are going to become one streaming service. The timing of that is going to be first in the United States starting next summer, and then they're going to roll it out to the rest of the world. Some of the international markets won't happen until 2024, and and for those of you, well, probably in this room, maybe a lot of people don't care, but if they canceled the film Batgirl that was going to go directly to streaming, which was like a $70 million film. They canceled some other films that had already they had already spent money on. They canceled a bunch of other films that they hadn't spent that much money on yet that were going to go to the streaming service. So they're no longer trying to directly compete with Netflix. I think the Netflix strategy is a wrong one. They said, it's not that you don't make stuff for streaming services, but I think they want to put more what you would consider television, more series, things that are like multi episodes on the streamer, or really low cost films. But I don't think you're going to see 70 million, $100 million productions go directly on a streaming service, at least with HBO, and I'm done speaking on
Okay.
that.
So Jeff G just found an article that I just pinned to the top of the room. But this was dated a while ago, July 21 of 2020. U.S. carrier Nimitz conducts drills with India near key choke point of Malacca. So India and the U.S. Did joint naval drills at the Strait of Malacca. Gee, wow! I wonder why. I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what scenario they're planning for.
Too close to home.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of interesting. And he found another one about strategic importance of Strait of Malacca in Southeast Asia. Strait. Anyway, you already know that if you can put two thoughts together. So,
Look at the map.
yeah, we're just talking about how how dependent China is for shipments, both importing and exporting, going through the Strait of Malacca, and why the U.S. can just kind of, worst case scenario, uh, camp out near the Strait of Malacca if China starts being overly aggressive in anywhere on planet Earth. It would just be like, that's the jugular vein of China, is right at the Strait of Malacca, so you can just camp out there. So here's your top tech headlines for today, which is Friday. Happy Friday, August 5th. So the top story today is that Amazon, which is a startup your cousin might have been involved in,
I
plans
wish.
plans to acquire Roomba maker called iRobot. You know,
Collector of how many tens of millions of internal maps of houses worldwide?
Yes,
every,
that's I shared this news because I own Roombas from the beginning, and two of them, and they know every single corner in my house. So I was like, okay, now I will have Amazon looking everywhere through the cameras or whatever, or Alexa, and then Alexa will be like, "Oh, Aram, you're out of paper towels," or "Okay, let's order one from Amazon," or something. And
Alexa now has minions.
and they acquired it for $1.7 billion, and their own personal, like, this floor cleaning vacuum thingy failed, or not, it didn't take off, so they just acquired this. And I think Amazon is also trying to acquire all autonomous home cleaning, or any kind of tech which is related to autonomous functionality inside the house. And guess what? We'll be having these appliances shopping through Amazon in no time.
I don't know if anyone ever read the book Quality Land. It's a really good sci-fi book that makes fun of a lot of stuff, but you learned a lot. So there, the devices become kind of like so Amazon is basically the company that takes over everything. Like, they don't name it Amazon, but you kind of have to kiss your iPad to order something or to pay for stuff. So they made this so you're more like closer to your technology, and it's very funny. And but anyways, I wanted to say all my cleaning devices that do it by themselves have names because I feel like they deserve that if they clean my stuff. So it's interesting
Yes, and my
to
puppy love riding on it too.
So it will be interesting how they will tap into that, and our emotions that we get like attached to them, and stuff, to be more involved and less scared of them. I think it's kind of interesting. It will turn out the same way in the as in the book.
okay. So the second big, well, on the first big story point, um, I guess it would be interesting to do a deep dive on all the concerning new data points that this will add to Amazon's endless cadre or quiver of data points that they continue to collect on people. And iRobot, uh, be yeah. There's, other than the data, just there's another interesting point, which was Amazon had its own home robot attempt a few months
They had
back,
a tech demo internally.
which didn't really pan out, I think, the way they had hoped. So that's what
This
makes
little
it
telescoping camera. They'll be like, "I want to look what's on your countertop." And it's like this is so awkward.
Or I'm gonna collect data from the trash I'm collecting from your house. Oh, look at this dirt, or the piece of plastic, or the food particle. What are you ordering? Let's order it again. I don't know, because a lot of history can be told by collection of the garbage. There are studies on it. So Roomba collecting the dirt from the floor can give Amazon many, many unique data point and perspective in terms of household usage of things.
Can they analyze your debris, like from the skin you drop, from the hair you drop? Can they analyze you?
I mean,
If
it
you think
depends
about
on
what
what you
Not
you
did to
yet.
the hair.
Not every
oh, that's
normally,
awesome.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
right. You could do DNA testing from
yeah. from the
Exactly.
hair, hair
I'm seeing
follicles.
one dystopian update. Now with the latest Roomba, I get to know it as it knows you.
But before you get there, I mean, how did Target know someone was pregnant, right? It's more of like a machine learning thing. So I think enough Roombas, you could tell when someone's going to have a relationship status change, when someone's not sleeping over at the other person's house.
When they start
You will,
tripping over the Roomba.
No, no,
Chris,
new
more
hair,
seriously,
new,
it's
new
the
hair cells
amount of dirt it
detected.
collects or how often you send it to go do its task. These are the things that are very obvious that you can detect in large numbers if you had that data
Oh yeah,
right now. You
occupancy
don't
data
need to
is
put a new
huge.
sensor on it. You don't need to. These DNA, like the cost of a DNA sequencer on a Roomba, not likely.
But any
Oh
device
wow.
have a camera has this problem. We have these phones with cameras with us every day. Do you cover it up?
Yeah, yeah, but BB, the thing is, Roomba is on a schedule. You're not at home, it's just moving around your house whenever it wants. Not whenever, like it's on a schedule. But what if they can remotely like control it and it can go around your house looking into your rooms and whatever? Phone is
Yeah,
way too.
sure. I agree with you. But this is not a Roomba problem. This is the problem for every, home device with cameras. So
Sensors are cheap. They get to be like 10 cents to like 30 cents for like a complete IoT communications package with optical microphone, whatever you want to put into that. The fact is that when you make these things cheap enough, it starts getting more expensive to not include it in every single consumer device manufactured. That just becomes the default.
yeah, but at least 101 is not to use the product made in China. Lately, we have this hacked screens in every, not every, but 7-Eleven convenience stores because they have this big screen used as the for broadcasting the advertisement. So the first day they hacked that and they say Pelosi is a crazy
Yeah,
something like
remember,
that.
BB?
Yeah,
Remember, BB?
so
You were trying to promote the Xiaomi smart TV.
no,
Remember?
no, no. I'm not
You remember?
promoting. No, no. I'm just saying it's very cheap because I'm not using Xiaomi at all. Even all those cameras is so cheap. I mean, home camera and all these devices, like just as I said, the 65 inches television, like just eight
That
600 US
U.S.
dollars for that smart
in our
TV.
nation is 200
But as long
periods.
as you don't
There has never
connect
been
the
anything
internet, but that lose the
that's
point
worked
of smart
like
TV.
now.
Anyway, just try not to use anything made in China with the internet connected.
That's like
The one,
everything manufactured.
the one thing I was trying to think about with Amazon, it's an interesting acquisition, but and I have not paid attention to Alexa shipments, but from a voice AI, Siri, Bixby, the list goes on. I mean, we've had a lot of permission and trust issues allowing Alexa into our home to do much more complicated processing, right? So eventually you would think that the Roomba would talk to the Alexa, which relies on AI and natural language processing. I mean, where is that ecosystem in term bad example there, Echo, but where's the ecosystem as it relates to giving permission to allow Amazon to come into our house? Because the dash buttons kind of came and went. Alexa, there's trust issues and people are shutting them off and throwing them in in other places where they're not active. So, I mean, what barriers would Roomba have? Or is it just another thing in the toolkit?
They got the doorbells too that they essentially send data to the cops and stuff. So there's that
Yeah,
aspect
that
as
I would
well.
say, yeah, that's a good example of a success. I would agree. I use it.
But another thing to point out with the Amazon stuff that's kind of interesting is that these data sets, with the matter of consent. So two parts of this is what a little more nuance. One is that when people buy a Roomba, and you buy it for your grandma, etc., you might buy it going, well, I've looked for Roomba's privacy policies. I'm considering what their stuff is. It's like I think the trade-off is worth it. Whatever consent you ever give to a tech company will get changed over time without you doing anything. So people that might have been okay with Roomba having that data because they're like, okay, I can kind of believe what Roomba does or whatever. Doesn't matter. They sold it to Amazon, and now you're under Amazon's policies. And so that data retroactively gets acquired with that. That's typically in one of those the privacy policies or the end user license agreements or whatever. Part of it is that you grant them the ability to sell your data when they get acquired. So that's good luck clawing that back. Supposedly, you could do like European data personal stuff, but because we don't data laws in USA and in all of other countries, even then it's typically lagging behind what that data actually looks like. So you're looking at this sort of like infinite progression where no matter what data you put into a tech ecosystem anywhere, it's at risk of getting acquired and used in an entirely different context. And when you combine it with new applications, it means that whatever way you initially consented to that will completely modified later on. So that's one component. The other point I just want to point out is it's a little more of a funny one. If Roomba is able to like be dispatched anywhere in your home, and then you have the Alexa that's able to like call on it, this means Alexa now has retribution if it doesn't like the tone of your voice. It can send a
No,
little
no,
thing to trip you up
I
later.
was thinking about the whole like sci-fi movie type thing. Now your Alexa have wheels. It has the capacity to move around your house. Before it was just stuck at your computer table, but not anymore.
Now
Thanks
it
to
now can
Roomba,
bump your
your
chair.
Alexa can go to your bedroom or your
Alexa,
bathroom.
Alexa, open the front door. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah, in that book, the second book, the in one house there, the appliances had kind of a squirrel, like they were arguing a lot, so they wouldn't work well anymore. So that guy was like a like robot psychologist, so he had to come in and make them, because I think the oven was falling in love with the fridge, but the fridge kind of felt the oven was too much. And anyways,
He was
but
cold to it.
it was
And then
it's
you
so
find
It was
out
too
about
hot
it
for
on
it.
your social media. It's like your refrigerator is in a relationship with your Roomba.
yeah,
I was coming
exactly.
back from Italy. I was coming back from Italy, and I think I'd watched just about every movie on the way there and back, and I saw the one with Joaquin Phoenix, his movie called Her, where he falls in love with an OS, and it gets really weird and really real really quick. It gets pretty odd in terms of like the things that we're saying, like tongue in cheek a little bit. Like these aren't far off.
Yep, I mean GPT-3 and other things. Like right now, we think of these devices relatively inanimate, but once you start putting, like Dolly style algorithms, like your Roomba, theoretically, right now you could be like drawing artwork on your floor, essentially out of the dust if you
Hmm.
wanted to, like freaking like Mona Lisa style. Your
Well,
fridge could be
there is
composing
art.
poetry.
Chris, there is art by Roomba. Have you not seen that? There is art done by Roomba. They are like blocks shaped, fixed on the ground, and Roomba has like coloring going in its brushes. And when it moves around, it just draws all around it. There's just art based on it. And imagine Optimus, from Tesla, being alive, not alive, but functional, and then communicating with each other. Optimus telling Roomba what to do, Roomba telling Optimus what to do, both of them running the household with Alexa on top, moving in the house. Oh my God.
As
Two
as
comments. One, they've already did this on South Park. If you guys want to watch that episode, I don't remember which one it is, but where they get them to talk to each other, and it's hilarious. But I just dropped off a passenger who reminded me that Ring is owned by Amazon, and they have a drone that'll fly around and do home camera security.
there
So
you go.
drone plus wheels. I mean, why colonize Mars? They've already kind of done it inside your house.
Another point to
You
consider on
stole
the
what I
earlier
was
chips
going to say.
argument. I'll be able to be really brief. The sensor that being like very cheap to even have those things for like cameras and Internet of Things, and those devices being like 10-30 cents, just integrate into everything and just becomes something just you put on for free to everything because why not? It becomes more expensive to rip it out. What's going to happen here, very interesting, is that there's so much of a push for artificial intelligence. A lot of this is defined by how much computing you can put at the edge is the buzzword. But what they're looking at, these AI chips, the thing is, once the AI chips are designed, and a lot of them are just stripped down GPUs, they aren't complicated. You can take a $6 Raspberry Pi Pico and run TensorFlow AI algorithms. They're quantitized and very tiny, and there's a limit to how far you can push them. But the fact that you could run that on a cheap $6 chip is just mind blowing. In the very near future, you're going to see the same cost curve apply, where it just becomes normal for every 10 cent and 30 cent and 40 cent chip to by default run advanced AI algorithms. And at that point, just throwing in, oh yeah, let's just make it an artist, or let's have it have conversational GPT-3 style, like chatbot algorithm things onto there. Oh yeah, just throw it on for free. It only costs like a few pennies more, a dime or two more. And then eventually it becomes so standardized that it becomes difficult to take it out. Our devices are going to take a huge leap forward on just embodied intelligence just because it's harder to make them without it. And that's going to be really strange when we're used to thinking of inanimate objects in our home, because they're not going to be inanimate for very much longer. It's going to be by default, they're going to be quite smart. One last thing to point out, and I'll turn back over, is increasingly these decisions are not made by the individual. When we think about these things, we normally frame them in the frame of consumer choice, saying, oh, if I purchase this versus not purchase this, and it is a decision that you make for yourself. The thing that's when you start to cross a certain scale, every neighborhood, every community makes a decision for all the other people in the community. When someone puts a Ring doorbell, they're making a decision about sharing data with Amazon and the cops and their local police thing, not just for themselves, but for all of the neighbors within its initially vision range. So it's like, 12, 20 neighbors. When you go visit someone else's household, as we did in the pre-COVID days, and increasingly might be doing so again, you're not doing it just for your data privacy for you. You're doing it for every guest that comes over. Same thing for the Roombas, same thing for every other smart TV device in a public space, bars, etc. These are not decisions made by the individual anymore. They're becoming essentially group community things. And I think that incorporating that into the privacy discussions make a lot more sense.
So
So
when I saw
Alexa and your sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
when I saw this news and something came to my mind, I recognized two patterns. Amazon Quest to know every single thing about your house indoors, acquiring all the autonomous devices like Roomba and other cleaning supply, machines and stuff. And then Tesla's Quest to know every single edge and corner on the roads externally. So Amazon is invading interior of your house. Tesla is noticing and collecting data about everything outside. And then yesterday, during the shareholders meeting, there was a question about Dojo collecting data from all the cars and then having that communication between the cars so the cars could communicate with each other at the same time. Elon also mentioned the boring company, the tunnels underneath the surface. Sorry, the geese are loud today. Underneath the surface of the earth. So Tesla is collecting data right now from your roads, and then the future plan of connecting these cars with that satellite, knowing everything that's happening outside of your house, and then Amazon interiorly knowing every single corner of your house through Roomba and other devices. So these are the two patterns I'm recognizing, that these two companies are going to collect data of everything. And another thing, if Roomba is collecting dirt, is collecting your skin, dead skin and hair follicles and whatever, how how that's going to transfer or translate in terms of uh, detecting patterns, pathologies, and connecting. So that's also something to consider.
I heard a gentleman wanted to speak before Iran. Was it Eric?
No, no, that's okay. We can move on. Thanks.
Okay, next up is
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
Because yeah,
Sure.
so actually, if we use this kind of smart devices, in the end, we need to compromise or trade off for our privacy. But it's better because in the U.S., at least for this kind of giant tech company, if they break the law, you can sue them like a case action. So I mean, it's better to put your data to this kind of tycoon technology company, or you'd rather choose someone smaller and you don't know the security level they have. I think in the end, still the best company. I mean, the big company still the choice. I like to hear your opinions on this.
Okay, so the next big topic is from Nikkei. They say they have sources that Apple is asking suppliers in Taiwan to ensure that shipments from Taiwan to mainland China are labeled as coming from Taiwan, China, or Chinese Taipei, after Pelosi's visit stirs tensions. Now, that on the surface, that doesn't sound like a big deal until you unpack it a little bit and you think about what must be brewing underneath, which is China must have had a meeting with Apple and
Could
is
they
big.
just call it? Could they leave off the China part and just call it Taiwan, or that would make them a little grumpy? I mean, it'd make it simpler, it'd be a lot cleaner.
Well, no. The point is that mainland China is forcing Apple to force Taiwan to refer to itself as China.
I think this is surprising to Apple, but or manufacturing. I mean, the companies here, if they export product to China, actually they all labeled as Taiwan, China, in Chinese. So, sure, please.
No, read the next article for the context, Tyler.
Aren't
Next,
the imports and tariffs different though for Taiwan versus China? So one country, two taxes.
after, after Nancy Pelosi visits Taiwan, sources say shipments to Pegatron's factory, which is a massive hardware assembly company used by Microsoft, Tesla, and others. So shipments to Pegatron's factories and others were being held by Chinese customs. So China is playing games with the supply chains. And the next is from Reuters as Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. Cyber attacks from China and Russia increased on Taiwan. Some 7-Eleven store TVs displayed, quote unquote, warmonger Pelosi get out of Taiwan.
The question I have is, given that they destroyed any idea of one country, two systems with the Hong Kong situation, um, does does anyone truly believe that that they have a hope of doing
Oh,
anything but the same in Taipei in Taiwan?
hold that thought, Nicholas, because a tweet that I shared in our little back channel in the past 24 hours was the ambassador, China's ambassador to France, went on French TV. I believe it was French. Believe it was TV 24, and had a little debate and said in French that once they invade Taiwan, they would then re-educate the Taiwanese. Was his word,
Uh-oh,
which
that's not a good word.
Yeah, yeah,
that's
make Taiwanese patriots, and
make them
then
patriotic, right,
yeah.
towards China.
So just like a Xinjiang, the re-education camp, something like that. Yeah, that's what the ambassador of the France in China, China in France. Sorry, backwards.
More people go into those camps than come out. That's not a good thing.
So the next big topic is
But a question: Does
yeah.
anyone can anyone give a picture of what the end game is here? Is it just to be self-sufficient and to be self-sustaining? Because they don't have an economy that is self-sufficient or self-sustaining. So is it just Xi Jinping, like Putin, being effectively a wannabe dictator? Is that what's the game?
I
Phoebe,
think
have you got any idea?
if we asked Henry Kissinger, I think he would say the goal is everybody speak Mandarin. So I don't know about you folks, but I've studied Mandarin, so I feel like I'm one step ahead of the game. But in general, I think they want to control that part of the world and represent a superpower in that region, and America can stop playing world police. I think is kind of generally their message that they should have sovereignty over their own region, and I think they're in a weird, precarious situation geographically speaking because they don't have good access to the oceans for the kind of manufacturing that they're engaged in. So a few logistical issues and other things like that. Because every time you have to ask Uncle Sam's permission to go through, in between Japan or whatever, I guess it gets a little bit tedious. Always asking for permission and saying thank you, master.
And China, they always said someday and in the near years, the GDP of China will prevail those of America. So that is one. I think it's a propaganda, but that is one index they say when they are going to be the strongest country in the world. That is one point, and another is the weaponry, how the defense and attack strength become. So
But
that's the book.
GDP is measured per capita, and the per capita GDP of the
Yes,
Chinese is tiny comparatively.
yes. That's why I said it's more like a propaganda. But they said in 2030, the GDP Chinese GDP will be over Americans. That that's how they promote. Yeah.
Yeah, but not if they don't have any products and they don't have any food which comes in and they don't have any, it just seems antithetical to actually their own survival. They need America as customers until they can self-sustain, which they cannot do.
Center of Humiliation had a whole doctrine based around it that essentially having foreigners is take an eternal celestial empire and then subjugate it, and with opium wars and conquering the canals in Beijing and everything. And so the one of the core ideas with the party coming to power was the idea of saying, if we have power with this, we'll never let the foreigners have the same amount of hold of us as we did back then. But the thing is that that doesn't fit with the Deng era, where he was, I'm mispronouncing things, but essentially saying, let's open up to the world and we can have economic progress. The thing is that with the current doctrine, it's still, even though essentially it's a lot more liberal than it was earlier, it still has the origins with a very, very revolutionary, overthrow everything external influence at its core. And so you're seeing essentially those splits happen right now, and with that internal tension going, do we keep foreigners out or do we want to trade and have everything happy? And yeah, the one market, the ability for them to essentially dictate market policy for saying, hey, a billion people, you could get access to our internal markets if you trade with us. By the way, the central state government is going to be negotiating this. Oh, and by the way, once you negotiate with this, we're going to clone your IP, and now we don't need to trade with you anymore. Would you like some exports? We'd very much like to dump some on your market. Those sorts of policies become a possibility when you have that sort of centralized governance. When you have things more split apart and fractured, like they did for well over 100 years, that left them very vulnerable. And that memory might not be essentially something that they scream about publicly a lot. Essentially, in the current propaganda, they like to project more of an idea of this wolf warrior diplomacy, thing of strength. But when you look at essentially the history of it, and you see essentially where that weakness comes from, that they're trying to overcompensate for, it makes a lot more sense.
Okay, next up
Tyler,
is
you're muted.
okay. Next up is from Axios that in a filing, Twitter says Elon Musk's counterclaims are factually inaccurate, legally insufficient, and commercially irrelevant, and don't justify ending the deal.
We want our billions, baby.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to say anything else.
Our law
Oh,
firm is
oh,
being paid for fortune to say whatever is required to make this thing happen.
by the way, Tyler, you're the David Sachs actually showed his subpoena on the All
Ah,
In podcast,
oh, did
and
he?
he went through it with a little bit of detail, and so essentially, the point he's making is apparently what they're asking for is like copies of all the stuff that he tweeted out in regards to the Musk deal or the Musk proposition is the largest part of what they're asking for in the subpoena.
Hmm.
Um, and he said, what's interesting, and I don't think he's wrong on this. So Twitter's law firm, which gets getting paid like $2,000 an hour, is basically trying to subpoena, he said, stuff that's already in the public domain because the tweets are in the public domain. Okay. This is where it is. And he said he's actually, which I suspected, he's going to try to have the subpoena squashed. He's got a lawyer, and they're going to try to squash the subpoena. Um, this
Yeah, I
is what.
might lose this bet to you, Ken. Our little wager. I think I might lose.
About what? About whether the subpoena gets squashed? I forgot what we even.
No, I thought that Musk would pay the breakup fee, and would get would pay some sort of punitive damages, so the difference between the market, the 44 billion and the current market price, some sort of proxy for that. And you said that he would be forced to do the deal. So I think you might, you may win.
Oh
When he
yeah.
was able to launder the Tesla shares back out while he's high with stuff without depressing the price of it, I wonder if this whole scheme will still come up a net profit from all this.
Exactly. I would so like him to get spanked on this.
Okay. The For those who didn't know what Ken was referring to, basically I think David and Chamath and maybe even Jason from the All In podcast were subpoenaed as part of this trial.
Yeah, the only
And
one who
by the
didn't get
way,
subpoenaed was
talking,
Friedberg
by the way.
because he never says anything.
Yeah, Jason's not talking because I think Jason's situation, quite frankly, Tyler, might be a little bit different, because I think there were some public things he said early on about
No,
maybe
he had a vehicle for funding. He was
that's
The
exactly
putting
right.
money in.
syndicate,
Yeah,
the
yeah, the
syndicate.
syndicate. Yeah,
That thing. He's in a different situation than David Sachs. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was, for those who don't know, again, was proposed a way for people to participate in the fundraising necessary to buy Twitter, for Elon to buy Twitter.
I think the discovery is going to show that those guys were definitely in the conversation with him. I think that's what should be more worrying, is that the all-in guys were definitely encouraging Elon to do this deal, because it did make sense if he wanted to have a super app along the lines of the WeChat, and if he was going to become the meme king, the crown himself the meme king. The issue is obviously, he did it at a price that was the wrong price, and he did it without really having the financial wherewithal to do it comfortably. And so that's why he needed to syndicate with others. And as soon as you start syndicating with others, that's the real problem, because if that's where the sort of dichotomy comes into play, because if you're trying to raise money for something, you're going to sell the best picture. But if your legal position is that it's not true, then you've got evidence against yourself. And so I think that Jason is probably, as Ken says, in a different position than David. But I suspect that Jason doesn't do anything without consulting the rest of his buddies.
Okay, so next up, how crypto developer Ian McAlinnow posed as 11 different independent developers and created a web of DeFi protocols that temporarily inflated the total value locked on Solana.
We talked about this in yesterday in respect of HKD and AMTD, and the fact that you have a large shares outstanding, but a low float. And so what you can do is you can manipulate the market cap by having a small amount of shares that are played with by the controllers, and that's all part of the securities problems that you have when you play these games. And so this is the problem of people pretending that they've got decentralized technologies versus really having Ponzi nomics and market manipulation, which is exactly why I think Gensler is correct in calling these guys out.
Okay, next up from The Guardian, the UK government plans to require that migrants convicted of a crime scan their faces up to 5 times per day on a smartwatch. Locations will be tracked 24 hours per day. If that wasn't The Guardian, I would say that sounds ridiculous.
You don't want to become an enemy of the state.
Hmm.
It's okay. This is just the early beta trials. Eventually, we'll have the general consumer version for everyone else.
The Roomba.
This
Where's
foreign
Will
Roomba
Smith when
finds
you
offenders,
need
its
him?
clients.
these foreign offenders, are they detained foreign offenders or those that are not detained? That means it's like what do you call that? Ankle bracelet.
House arrest, yeah, they have this,
Oh, okay.
it's the way you can keep a lot of people imprisoned without actually paying for the imprisoning costs, but still you manage to pay it
Ah,
anyways. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, and they're going through a process of they're applying for asylum.
And by the way, this tech is never stuck with just the people that they use it on initially. It's just because they lack legal representation in the same status that you do in other places. There's less to protest, and people go, "Well, that's just the other people over there." Once the technology is developed, once people figure out the social mechanisms, in many ways, the social developments are actually more difficult parts of the technology. It's not whether or not you make the tech for a sensor, is whether or not you come up with the arguments, the social patterns, the rhetorical reasoning, whatever it takes to get people to actually compliant in using the technology. And
It's the
that takes
boiling
that's the
frog.
yeah, exactly. It's the market, it's the product market fit they talk about in startups all the time. The thing is, once you have that figured out, you can deploy and scale that. And that's the thing to really pay attention to. It's not necessarily whether it's the sensor you can wear on your wrist, it's whether or not the government's requiring you to use it or not. And if it's only requiring some subset of the population, it's like, well, it really stays that way. The question is whether or not it'll be as voluntary as it scales to the rest of the population if need be.
And Chris, it's politically acceptable because if you look in the back channel, there's someone who's saying, if it's a criminal, it's justified. And as Cal pointed out, it's not a criminal.
Sure. I mean, like in the UK's history with things, I mean, it's like,
It's
uh,
it's the if it's a criminal, it's justified. If it's an immigrant, then that's again notionally justified, but it's clearly just a step towards the surveillance state that is already in place in China, etc. And so that I think these are just slippery slopes. And then the question is who watches the watchman and who decides who are the criminals and who decides all of this. And when democracy is under threat, this is you get to adopt these technologies by picking the people that you feel will be politically acceptable, whether they're criminals, whether they're immigrants. This is always the way. And slowly but surely, it's like the poem by Pastor Niemoller. First they came for the communists, and then they came for the Jews, and then who was left for me?
That's something kind of interesting is like during Cromwell era. This is kind of going back a few hundred years, but there was literally crimes passed for vagrancy, but vagrancy would clearly mean you wandered in from a town 10 miles over, and if you couldn't explicitly say like which job that you had, like you're unemployed, they'd whip you, cut off your ear, and send you back to where you came from. But the thing is, like, so their tourism board was not exactly that all welcoming during that era. But the thing is, the idea of immigrants, when we think about, somewhere far, far, far away from their side of the planet. The thing is, historically, that could literally mean just the town over, and those definitions can change over time. And it's kind of interesting contrasting that with like some of the stuff they had like more in Finland, where and like some of the more Nordic countries, where instead of having the enclosure acts, the variation they had was more of the idea of right to roam. So vagrancy essentially was like, how could you be a vagrant? People are just, everyone has a right to essentially explore nature. And you see these like decisions made hundreds of years ago, and that affects vastly the kinds of cultures that develop hundreds of years later. But when you're seeing the technology versions of this, it's like, well, if you have to keep track of the people from one village over, it's like, well, let's make sure to put things under your wrist because they might be from another country over, because that's totally different. We're talking about human beings here. Human beings aren't complicated. We have relatively simple needs and wants, and a few people essentially might be mean to each other, but overall, it's not that complex. When we're able to differentiate people into the other versus the people that are trusted and
Chris, can we
nearby,
move on to
it
tech
makes a
as
big
opposed to
difference.
like all of this stuff? Because otherwise, we
Hang
could be
on.
discussing, bail requirements in New York and San Francisco. We'll be here all
Yeah.
day on criminal justice.
I also have a couple of comments, but if it's okay with everybody to share.
Pat,
Can
you
I
wanted to
just
say
jump
something?
in? Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
please. I've been coming in and out of the network, and so was dashing around trying to get here. So I apologize if I repeat something that somebody's already said. But there are many, many issues that article in the Guardian reveal about this simple thing of having facial recognition smartwatches being issued by the Home Office in the UK. There's the asylum seeker thing. There is the offender thing. There is whether it's a criminal offender, somebody who's being given bail but have to stay in touch in the house or whatever. they already have bands that I forget what you call them now, but it's in the article, bands that actually are monitored, straps that you wear on 24 hours a day, and you can't really walk out of a certain perimeter of your house because you're bound in there. And then there's also the other aspect of how facial recognition is proven to be technically not really well developed enough that it can differentiate different faces and facial features, especially those of people of a different color. So you're talking about racial discrimination there and all sorts of other discrimination. So all of those things about who's watching who and why, with discrimination and so on, all come into this discussion and argument about whether it's even right or legally all right to have this kind of thing. But to go to Ken's query about technicalities and technology, I wonder if anybody in the room actually knows about wristwatches and whether it's possible to even take a photograph of yourself with a wristwatch. Not only that, don't you have to have it hooked up to a telephone? That kind of wristwatch that actually can have that technology that is usable in this kind of way with the AI technology for facial recognition is quite a sophisticated watch.
It used to be.
Uh,
It's cheap now. It used to be something.
It's,
It would have cost you hundreds of dollars a few years ago. Now it's something that cost you like $2 to $10. It's not
and
that
you're
much. It
talking
used to be.
about non-branded ones, aren't you, Chris?
I'm talking about the chips that go underneath it. The
Yeah,
brands are just the thing we slap on top. The
yeah,
chips are cheap
absolutely.
now.
But
It
is the
used to
Yeah.
be very
quality,
expensive.
Kids' toy now.
what about the quality of the image that is perceived?
It's the
Because
same
if,
thing. Same thing or better than what you have in a lot of phones. Actually, the thing is that the thing is not actually the sensor chip. The thing that's actually expensive is the lens, and that's essentially just determining essentially what angles you're getting from. If you're optimizing for certain angles, you can actually in data sets, facial recognition only is determined by the what it was trained on. If you train it on that specific camera with that specific watch, you can do just as good as data set as you would have essentially as an in the wild. The thing is,
and the
you have to
truth
train
is,
it and
you're getting
calibrate
it.
it for that specific sensor.
The truth is, you're just trying to get a test of liveness. They do this when you're trying to do
Yeah, exactly.
KYC AML, and all you're really doing is making sure that someone's not taking a picture of a picture. And so it's a liveness test, and a liveness test combined with a GPS locator is what they want to do. So it just saves them from imprisoning people. So it saves costs and it enables people. So you're going to get given the option either you can be kept in a deportation, blah, 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 or you can take this picture, and that's really all they're trying to do. It's really all about money and surveillance.
how much do you think one of these smart watches with a camera that's competent enough to take an accurate kind of photograph that can judge whether a person is real or not, live or not, as opposed to a photograph? How much would each watch cost, do you think?
They'll charge the state $6,000 for it because they're saying it's cheaper than having a parole officer check in on things or the immigrations thing. It'll
Uh-huh.
cost them about $12 to manufacture at the
Yeah,
manufacturer, and then the middleman that's doing the design work they subcontract out to will charge them a few $100s per unit. So between all that, you can kind of see where the middleman like splits between all those things occur.
absolutely. And just to clarify, I can go down to my local whatever shop, technology shop, or even get it on Amazon that I can actually get my hand on these smartwatches now.
It's you'd have to custom order it right now or have the technician nearby that could create something at these price points. However, once you have market adoption for the underlying chipsets, the underlying like if the government just says I'd like to have 100,000 of these or a million of these, all the
Mm-hmm,
chips to create those just got cheaper for everyone, as did
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
supply chain, etc. So
Okay.
that's the other thing about when governments decide about what to buy,
Mm-hmm,
and one things, it creates a middleman market
mm-hmm.
for making all the devices cheaper for other applications immediately afterwards. And that's why
So,
technology gets cheaper over time.
absolutely, and technology, I completely approve of technology and AI technology that can actually do things that help us as a human society and also are ethically conscious. Well, the policy making is ethically conscious. The last and final interesting thing about that article from the Guardian is what it raises about the awarding of the contract, 6 million UK pounds to actually get this technology to the Home Office. One doesn't know the quantity or the number, but basically, the middleman already exists, has been awarded in a very dubious awarding procedure, and £6 million are going to be spent on this for whatever outcome or benefit. And I expect that there will be further news to come on how this progresses. That's really my take on it. Thank you.
Yeah, so the 6 million is nothing in these guys' budget. So like this is
Yeah, that's not as yeah. It's an
yeah,
R&D
it's not
pilot. That's a pilot
inconsequential.
project.
And this is just another, I mean, to the points you guys have brought up, and honestly, kids go around and take pictures of their faces all day long and post them on Instagram and everywhere else. So, I mean, this is definitely surveillance. I hear you. It's got good and bads, as you said. Either they're going to be in a detention facility, they're going to be out and about, they're being monitored, et cetera. There's a lot of points around it, but I agree with Ken. We can go back to tech.
Okay. Next up is Google updates search results for queries with quotes to show where the phrase appears in the results snippet instead of an overall description of the page.
There's some OCD nerds that are crying out, going, "Finally! It took 12 years." No, we're not going back from DuckDuckGo.
Next, from Haaretz out of Israel, they're doing a piece about a prototype of NSO's Pegasus from 2014 for Israeli police shows the user interface and features, including real-time wiretapping, meaning listening through the microphone, reading of messages, and remote camera control. Israel police planned to present cabinet with the system 8 years ago. It was intended to be capable of turning the infected phones, um, and operate them remotely. And so, if you want to see what a prototype of Pegasus looks like to be an operator of Pegasus, now you can from this article. And then the next is from Bloomberg. Crypto Bridge Nomad says anyone returning at least 90% of stolen tokens will be viewed as a white hat hacker, and the remaining 10% will become the reward. So Nomad's offering a bounty to recoup funds spirited away in a $190 million hack that again highlighted security vulnerabilities in the digital token sector.
Desperate group tries to save their currency.
A New York judge allows Voyager Digital to return $270 million in customer cash deposits, settling one of the company's larger issues after filing for bankruptcy. Jack Dorsey's Block reports their Q2 revenue down 6.6% year over year, and the Cash App Bitcoin revenue down 34% year over year. Visa and
When they have like the exponential growth curves and it gets like bigger every year, did they do the same thing in the other version where the losses will accelerate and it'll only be essentially being a bigger percentage every year? I mean, did they do those, or it's like no, they'll bottom out, they'll always go up?
it is a bit concerning when fintech, like legitimate fintech companies, are not growing and in fact, contracting. That's worrisome. Visa and MasterCard end ties with the ad arm of Pornhub owner MindGeek after a court ruled Visa must face a lawsuit alleging it is liable for CSAM distribution. That's child porn, basically. Child abuse. Visa and MasterCard on Thursday said they had suspended ties with the advertisement arm of Pornhub's owner, MindGeek. So we'll just call it Pornhub for short. So Visa and MasterCard cutting ties with the ad arm of Pornhub.
Was it like six most, like all their properties all up together was like six most visited site on the internet or something like that once they added all the other things? Some ridiculous amounts.
Because there's an article yesterday that court ruling that victims can actually sue the credit card company from Pornhub. So it's
Okay.
related.
A staff member from Senator Cynthia Loomis's office says The SEC is investigating Binance and every U.S. crypto exchange, including Coinbase. Widely circulated reports that the U.S. SEC is investigating $20 billion crypto exchange Coinbase are just the tip of the iceberg. And YouTube is testing pinch to zoom with its premium subscribers, allowing users to zoom into a video on screen even in landscape mode. EU-based hedge fund Brevan Howard has raised $1 billion from institutional investors for its crypto unit. Okay. Clubhouse or Clubhouse Clubhouse starts beta testing private communities called houses or houses, which can be created by a person or group looking for a more intimate alternative to clubs.
They're bringing it back, baby. They're bringing back that exclusivity factor, the pre-beta. They're bringing beta back, baby.
Bring build
How,
beta back better, baby.
it all depends on the leader. I mean, the one who create the room, right? So if that one is malicious, then you have a house full of malicious people as well.
And I think they're
So
trying to
does
U-turn,
anybody
U-turn their bad decision to give up the exclusivity of Clubhouse initially. So right now they are trying to U-turn a little bit to let people have a chance to get that kind of experience again if they choose to.
The valuations aren't coming back. I'm sorry, they're not coming back, but they can at least try. Sorry, Mr.
No, I was
So
just gonna ask if anybody knows the details of like how it doesn't seem to be just going back to by invitation only or exclusivity. It looks like houses would be kind of rooms instead of clubs. So how does the hallway and other things are structured? If anybody knows the details of what they are trying to roll out.
So the one difference, even though I think you're right, I think that there's not that much difference between a house and a club, because if you're running a club, like Tyler can throw anybody out of this club if he wants, right? Okay, so there isn't that much difference, other than I think some of the software for for um, the moderating the room might be a little bit more advanced. Supposedly that's what they're claiming in the houses. What I mean, they did. There's been a couple of rooms in the last 48 hours on this stuff, and nobody asked the question about whether. Well, actually, the shouldn't do this room. I mean, so Paul put out a huge tweet yesterday, like in 8 parts, um, but really didn't get into some of the detail. And so what? But you have a little bit more supposed control on the house. But the real issue, quite frankly, and there was a whole other room going on simultaneously with our room right now. I think they just disbanded it because it started earlier. Is on the blocking feature, because I've said this forever. The way they've got this blocking feature,
Poorly implemented.
okay, is the number is one of the biggest reasons why people have left Clubhouse, beyond obviously the world opening up. And I don't know whether how the blocking feature works in these clubs, in these houses, whether and it could be maybe that the person who starts the house may have the ability to remove anyone's ability to block anyone, or this is where it is. So that would be the only real difference, because one of the things I found out yesterday, because I'm in one club, okay, I'm like member number 15, and how this thing got started. Some guy wanted to start a club who happens to live in my state, who I don't know. In fact, I really barely even know him on Clubhouse, but so I got invited because we live in the same state, and he named it after Nevada, where we live. And the only reason he named it Nevada wasn't because he wanted some small little club to just talk about our small little state. He wanted to start a house. Excuse me. He wanted to start a house, and so the first, because you have to submit an application. So the first one he submitted was for geopolitics, and they rejected that. Then he submitted some other broad category, and they rejected that. So then he figured, okay, I'll do something really narrow, and so he came up with this thing. I want a house called Nevada. Okay, and they approved that. The thing is, the way that he set this house up, and I didn't realize that the person who starts the house can decide how many invites to give out to each person. They can give out 0, they can give out 3, 5, 10, whatever. He gave 3 to every single person. But you know how fast that multiplies? It multiplies like COVID. Okay, everyone's got 3 invites. And then they send somebody else an invite who then has 3 invites. So if you actually did like a Venn diagram to this Nevada house and the rest of Clubhouse, there's going to be a tremendous overlap. I mean, it's not just, and there's no real community about what it's organized of, or then everyone sending everyone invites. And one of these other people said, who was a creator, that she started one, and she's given out. She was initially doing the same thing, and then she realized it's a problem, so she cut off all the invites, so she doesn't have that problem. And so she's going to end up with a more smaller, exclusive thing. But there were a lot of people who spoke up against these houses, because a lot of people spoke up about the fact that we've all met other people that we never would have met if we didn't have public hallways and weren't able to go into these public rooms. And if all these houses are private and you never get an invite, you'll never meet anybody. So I don't think this is a particularly great idea. I think it's them throwing stuff up against the wall to deal with the fact that obviously the app is atrophied, and it doesn't deal with. He can't. I mean, they have no control over the fact that the world opened up, but they can't control the blocking feature. They can change that blocking feature, and they refuse. Okay, and that's why there was an entire room on blocking just now. There was a room like Ed Nussbaum and a bunch of people had a room on blocking several months ago with hundreds of people. That they sent the replay of that to the management, because Ed knows management. They do nothing. There's been newspaper articles written about this blocking feature, and they do nothing. Okay, so as long as they have this blocking feature, that is their number one problem, that it's under their control, that they don't want to deal with. So I don't think the houses are going to solve the problem.
I
Is
will
that,
I will
do
disagree
you
with.
think? Oh, sorry, Charlie. Go ahead.
The biggest issue I don't think is the blocking, and I would love to test it. I would love to be analytical about it. I would propose that a bigger problem than blocking is just the overall uh, abundance of stupidity.
Yes.
So I would, and and so I would like to raise it as a vote. So I would like to have a referendum. What is the
Let's have one. I love this.
yes? If let's have a vote. I'm curious, just by show of hands, you can vote one way or the other. Do you think Clubhouse's biggest problem is, as Ken says, the blocking problem? Which I agree. There's
No, but Tyler, define what I said. The
yeah,
problem they can control. They can't
okay,
control stupidity either.
sure they
Okay.
can.
Can
Of
let's
course they
vote
can.
first. Let's vote
They,
first.
they had they had controlled stupidity, and I had predicted, as Cheryl and Cal will tell you, that as soon as they open this up to the public, this is going to have a very serious problem. And I explained in very specific details, specifically why the app will fail as soon as they open it up to the public.
It's like that clip from Men in Black. He says, a person is smart, intelligent, reasonable, but people are dumb, panicky animals, and they're dangerous, and you know it. That's the sort of thing here that I think during COVID, I think cabin fever combined with lockdowns, combined with, hey, look, this is a new way we're talking. It's real time on the internet. It's not like this delay that we usually have. So I think that was kind of a recipe just waiting for a disaster. But in this case, I think, the blocking feature was useful when it was exclusive. when it was invite only. And I think the magic number here is, I think, 2, not 3 invites. So I remember when if you got an invite, you only got 2 extra invites, and then there was like a chain of custody, or kind of like a, hey, we can track down and see, oh, look, this person invited this person. Oh, okay, now we know that there's this sort of flawed reasoning or judgment there, or some sort of evaluation there that you can either agree with or disagree with. So that's my take on it, but curious what others think after the poll, of course.
Okay. Just very fast show of hands. How do we do this? You do a. We're on stage already.
Turn off the hand
Hands off or the audience,
raise
right?
first, and
They
then
can
But if
audience.
I want
they
to poll the people on stage,
they,
they're already on
they
stage.
can hand raise. They can hand
Can't you
raise.
use the
Do it with the GIF
emoticons?
The
responses.
Yeah, you
GIF
can do the
hand
Yeah,
icon.
just thumbs up, thumbs down, Tyler. Thumbs up for whatever blocking.
GIF
Thumbs
vote.
down for
Okay, I
yeah.
don't have
Just
that on
push
Club.
and hold on your profile photo.
Okay.
But you have that. It's the quickest way to do it is the hand raising. Otherwise, you have to hand count.
You can
We
use
There.
can't
reactions on
count, but
Club
we can
Deck.
have a general idea if it's thumbs up or down.
Okay, why does
Okay, I'll
polling
look at
not
the screen.
exist as a feature, right? Why can't we just do polls very quickly? This is like such
So
a
do
no-brainer in my opinion.
it's thumbs up or thumbs down. So do thumbs
Because
up if you think
Or
that the blocking is the primary fixable problem, as Ken said.
it could
Thumbs.
be. It could be because stupid people don't like doing polls. Maybe that's why they haven't implemented it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. So uh,
What's the question again, please?
do you think that the blocking is the biggest fixable problem in Clubhouse?
No.
So raise your hand.
Thumbs
So
up, thumbs up.
you got Joyce and Pat and Phil and
Oh, unfortunately, Ken, you're the only one who is thumbs up.
that's okay. And then give a thumbs up if you think the bigger problem is that it
Stupidity.
got you had a flood of idiocracy, yeah,
Yes, idiocracy, that's the
I
word.
vote Homer Simpson.
uncontrollable waves of stupidity. Okay, well I think I won that one handedly. Okay, so
I think most people abstained actually.
okay, well, you most did, but that's fair enough. So the point, I haven't made this point in quite a while, and I think I have a little. I'm going to share the story again for those who might have missed it the 10 times previously, because it's been damn near a year since I told the story, because I was telling the story almost daily in the days leading up to Clubhouse planning to open to the public. And I warned from very direct experience, because the startup that I was involved in with Jason Calacanis at Mahalo, we had created a product called Mahalo Answers, which predated Quora by a few years, which is essentially Quora. It was questions and answers. And anyone, it was a closed system. You had to be invited. And at the time, we had the most brilliant people in Silicon Valley asking and answering questions. I think Yahoo, by the way, we didn't invent that. Yahoo Answers deserves some credit for this. So imagine a very intimate Yahoo Answers with incredibly brilliant people like Elon Musk, who, by the way, was asking and answering questions. So we thought we had figured out the next great product on the internet, because the content quality was so fantastic, because the participants themselves were so fantastic, and people were asking questions and pinging in. You could ping in somebody who you think knows the answer. So I might not know the answer myself, but I know some brilliant person who does. I ping them in, they answer the question, everyone on the app is impressed. And you would sit and go for hours through random questions. Like, that's how good the content was. So, in our excitement, we opened it up to everybody, as one would. And within 24 hours, what had previously been one of the most exciting experiences online for the thousands of us who were sharing this, it quickly and immediately died within 24 hours. And I mean that very seriously. The quality of the content got so bad so quickly, because multiple people can answer questions. You have a question, anyone can answer it, and then
As Terry Pratchett once said, the only problem with having an open mind is that people will fill it with garbage.
But
Well, I think
what was
Quora has
happening
an
was
interest.
there was YouTube commenters answering Elon Musk's questions, and all of a sudden you you're, you've taken the conversation from the Stanford lunchroom to the Greyhound bus station, and the the really intelligent people in the room no longer want to be having conversations with everybody at the Greyhound bus station. So it just immediately dies. Now, when Charlie and Adam were starting Quora, I had mutual dear friends, in fact, former girlfriends in common, and said, you guys better be careful because here's what happened to us as soon as we opened Mahalo Answers. And when I had heard rumors that actually I had reached out to them when they were just starting Quora, and then when I heard that they were going to go public, I said, "You guys better really rethink that." And what they did was halfway, just a few hours into opening, they pulled the e-brake and stopped it letting people in, and then removed the people who had come in that first 7 hours. And they've dealt with trying to grow Quora constantly in a limited capacity by somehow limiting the stupidity on Quora. And they've done it's a very challenging thing to do. And they've done a fairly decent job of that. Now, that's why, given both of those scenarios, when the whole Clubhouse, conversation about opening publicly, I said that's an incredible, that's the best way to kill this app in 24 hours you could ever imagine. Because you just cannot imagine how significant the lowering of the average IQ of the average conversation in Clubhouse it will be immediate and severe, and it will scare off the intelligent people immediately.
It goes from being a conversation at the level of NASA or future of humanity to what do you mean plants like water in the toilet? And that's what it becomes. And I think if anything, I think this new house thing is an attempt to bring back that exclusivity, but I think it's too late. And Quora did something really stupid recently. I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but there is if somebody gives a reply and they're like, "Hey, for you to see this answer, you have to subscribe to my answers." And I was like, I don't know if I like that monetization model, but curious what others think, because I think that's kind of with the journalism and Steve Kirsch and all those folks. They found that platform for themselves as
Now,
well, right?
I'll
I,
say
I
this.
agree with Tyler that the
I kind
whole
of
quality
agree.
of Clubhouse disappeared as soon as they opened up the clubs to everyone. It just went straight down, and you couldn't. And the
And
discoverability was far worse as
I,
well.
the conversation in my club are not stupid at all. It's just everyone wants
Nicholas,
just.
did you finish your thought?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of agree and disagree. The quality of a conversation can go down quite significantly, but it's just I think everyone wants just to please everyone. Like you have to just be able to moderate it in a way that you invite the right people and you do some more prep work like I do in the club. So it takes me sometimes a few months to invite people because they don't have time. Like people that are intelligent are also usually mostly very busy, so you need to have a lot of prepared time. And then you have to call people out that just say stupid things without any data or any reasoning. And you just have to be okay with being the asshole in Clubhouse. And then that's fine because all you care about is about the quality of the room and the conversation. And I had a lot of discussions and a lot of backlash that I'm kind of the fact czar and shit like that. But I really don't care because I want, at least in my club, the conversation to have a level that people that actually do cutting edge stuff around the world, that they come and they feel like safe and that they can have a actual good conversation. I got feedback from researchers that are doing like stuff that nobody else is doing right now, that they had a great conversation and it gave them ideas and for new projects, and that was really enriching to come to the club. So, and I get that feedback more and more. I think it's just people, as soon as they're in the crowd, they want to be crowd pleasers, and that downgrades the level of, like, nobody wants to be the asshole and call people out to shut up and listen to people that actually know stuff.
Hey,
So
Katerina, I
Katrina,
agree that
you're
there are
I have
rooms.
a
Can I jump in? I agree there are rooms that are of value, and there are a lot of rooms that are not of value. But like everybody's here, right? Like we're all here by definition listening to this, so we find some value in this. It's I don't hear anyone answering the question here of how to grow and keep quality. It's just everyone's kind of complaining. So I think there's a lot of value here. There's a lot that's troublesome and challenging here. I don't know that we're going to solve this in this conversation. I'm just wondering if it's a slow news day today.
We had this a good
I have a
conversation about
couple of
this yesterday, where everyone was very complimentary, and I think that it was Tina who was said that she was hopeful that they would find a monetization mode, and I think her idea was that you would get this as a conference solution, and she mentioned that she'd had some conversations with Tyler about this previously. So, does it become an enterprise solution? Maybe. I had the conversation with Cheryl subsequently, and she mentioned that one of her close friends said that they thought that Amazon would be a natural buyer of this social audio platform. My view is I think it's going to be extremely hard to monetize this, even though I find that there is great value in this room specifically, but I don't go on any other rooms. And I have a club of my own with 30,000 plus members, and I never open it up because I can't be asked.
Cal, you were going to say.
yeah no I just one very astute comment by Sharon, I think, there about Nicholas being cut off. But anyway, I thought that was funny and astute. The second thing I wanted to say was I think Clubhouse is news. I think was it Jennifer? It may be a slow news day, but a lot of people invest time in this platform, and I think I listen to replays nowadays more than the live things, and I was listening to the last few ones, and it just seems to be something that people are anxious about, and they're talking about, and they've invested time and energy on this platform, and they're just trying to figure out and process that, and I think some of that is that. But so here's to your point, Tyler. I think it did change drastically when it opened up, but I think there's something that could have been better. I think some people like Anu were trying to help. Uh, Anu was in the leadership team, I think, at some point a while back. But he's kind of building the skill set to manage these conversations, right? So if you're in a business setting or you're in a some other setting, school or something, you don't just put a whole bunch of kids in a school, right, and open it up and say everyone's going to get educated, right? You make sure that the skill set of the teachers are there, or in that case, the people facilitating the learning are the teachers. In this case, the analog is this, I think, quite clever thing that the founders did, which I was really excited by at the beginning, was this really, really, really clever thing called moderator, and it's very different from the moderator in other social media places. It was literally kind of a sort of a leadership position. You could, anybody from anywhere with any background could lead something, right, and step up, and you don't get that chance. And a lot of the younger people that I used to talk to on the MBA clubs and other places found that very, very interesting. And it was just, they could come up, they could practice, and they could start managing conversations, managing debate. And one of the things that I got enticed by is the way that Tyler, you and Cheryl and some of the OG community were creating a conversation on here, where people would learn, all kinds of people would learn, and you get that feedback. Younger people would learn, older people would learn, people who didn't know about a topic would learn through debate, through entertainment, through whatever. And but that took skill set, right? That took real skill set. And I think naturally, Tyler, when you started doing this, you obviously had it in the physical world, right? You did it. And so you started applying it here. You started learning. Both Cheryl and I have watched you learn. And I've watched Cheryl just grow like an amazing leader. I just let her know earlier today in a back channel. I think in the last few days, weeks, that she's been running some rooms. I mean, what a serious leader, right? So Cheryl, kudos to you, right? I know in the past we have all kinds of arguments in the background when we're trying to deal with who comes on stage and all that kind of stuff. But I got to say, you manage, and so I think you grow, right? People grow even if they haven't done it in the physical world. My whole life I was a consultant, right? I was at KPMG, I was at Accenture, then I had my own consulting firm, and then as an operator in a business, I used that facilitation skill in a physical world. So some of those were intuitions that I had. And again, it's a different platform, so you have to learn how to use this on this platform. But I think, to Jennifer's point, I think the way they can deal with this is to figure out some way to increase the skill set of the people that take on these jobs to help facilitate the discussion. And I think that's something they can do more on without just opening up new formats where people can just jump in, randomly. And I see very little skill set out there right now, even. And whenever there's really good, and I think Katrina was just alluding to her style of leading and clearly works in the science club. And, I think that's what it is. It's the skill set of managing these conversations. And it's a real waste if they waste this platform, and it peters away, because I'm still addicted to it. I still come back to it 2 or 3 times a week. I listen to the plays, the replays, and when I can jump on, I jump on when I hear the stream.
But
So
Cal,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but with 10 million users, can it survive? It just,
no,
it's too.
I'm not making Nicholas. I'm not making a comment on what
No. I
the
understand that, but
clubhouse.
I'm asking
Well,
you a question. Like,
yeah, no, I don't think it
can
will.
it survive, like in
Okay,
reality, with just 10 million users?
Can,
Can
I
I
can,
ask
think
you?
it,
Can I ask
can
you
you
but
go down?
can I
Can
just
I ask a
answer his
question,
question,
Cal?
please? Can I please answer his question? Just ask me a question. No, I don't think it'll survive. I think somebody else needs to buy it, acquire it, be part of a bigger platform. And I think all the signs that I'm seeing is that they're not addressing the issues that they have to address. So yeah, sorry. Go ahead, whoever it was.
Yeah, Cal. Sorry, this is John. I wanted to ask your insights into this and others as well. Um, it strikes me that I was on a couple of the calls yesterday, just listening, and with this new announcement. It strikes me that just as you said, they're missing the critical feedback about how to make this work, and I suspect you're right that they're going to have to be acquired by somebody that knows how to really build it out better. But to me, the missing element is understanding the primary use cases of why different people engage in Clubhouse. So there are those who, like on this room, are really in establishing a collective understanding of breaking news in the tech space, which is an incredibly valuable function. You get international perspectives, you get perspectives from people inside companies. So that's one use case, which is actually pretty rare. There's another use case where people just want to hear their voice on a stage somewhere. There's another where there's pure entertainment. There's others for meditation. I mean, there are so many different use cases of why people come to social audio, and it seems to me, and what Katerina does, and what others do with quantum photonics. I mean, there there's like a universe of different user types, and it seems to me that the rules of engagement and the skill of the moderator, form follows function, and I don't think they've studied the functions well enough to know what form should support them. And my punchline is, I think they need to fractionate the whole platform into different rules, the form for different functions, the use cases of why people attend. And I think they could come up with, you don't want to create the John Scully problem that Steve Jobs had to fix of having, too much fractionation and lack of focus anywhere. But I think that if they found 5 or 6 different use cases that would benefit by different rules of engagement, how the functionality is applied differently in those different use cases, and then have people understand what it is that they want out of Clubhouse, and which of those shards of the whole are better suited to their interests. And there may be several use cases they want to go to, but I think if they're trying to solve the problem of really multiple diverse use cases of users with a single solution set, I think that's a formula for failure. Does that resonate with you at all, Cal?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah. No, no, it does. I think there's a lot of. I don't think I can. I think there's a structural issue, but we at this point, I'm just going to ask Tyler if he wants to move on. But I think there's a because you could put all those places in. You could even start training up. Not training, but coaching, having sessions like Anna was having on
Exactly,
moderation,
exactly.
etc. But you could do all that. But I think to the underlying implicit perspective, Nicholas was putting that there's a structural issue where the size now, how much money they put into this business, and how they, and the momentum they've got on it, and with the overall context of the venture market generally, because it is a venture funded business, and with the crypto crash as well. The crypto crash was keeping it up. It was a good vehicle for A16Z to just pump a lot of stuff out, which they did,
Exactly.
right? I think it was their vehicle to do that. Now they've lost hope in that. They've used it. They don't really care about it. It's
They
probably a
paid
write off.
$11 a user. I was doing the math the other day. It's
Right,
just crazy. You cannot pay $11 to acquire a user on a social platform. It's
right. But
mad money.
you can if you're going to pump crypto to them. All right. So that's I don't want to get into that discussion
That's
now,
true.
but I think
That's true.
yeah,
That's
because
that's true.
that's kind of the premise. You get all these users in, and then you pump crypto in a wild west where you're not doing it directly as a venture firm, but you're doing it through another vehicle, and you've got a stooge to run the business for you. But I'm not going there. All I'm saying is
Yeah.
I don't think the structural. If you can do all
Go
these good
there. Go
things,
there. Speak truth to power.
well, there's no power. Yeah, if there's power here, yeah. No, but I mean, it's. I think fundamentally the uh, the 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 venture community created this app, right? So it's a very good app. But then genuine people like Cheryl, Tyler, are running rooms every day, putting hours and hours into this. They're enjoying it. They're getting something out of it, but they're also giving a lot back. And I don't think that the underlying community gives a shit about them. Frankly, doesn't give a shit about them, right? And they had a different purpose, in my view, my personal hypothesis. They had a different purpose. They had a purpose that they basically saw this as at first it was a very, very compelling numbers were pulling through because of COVID, right? So nobody could take COVID out of it because that's all we had. We had lockdowns. I don't mean COVID. We had lockdowns, and with lockdowns, we still have COVID. So I mean to say that, but through the lockdowns, everybody's hanging around at home, so the numbers are looking phenomenal. This happened to Peloton. This happened to every consumer electronic tech company that wanted investment from me or anyone else. Like, oh, look at us, look at our numbers, right? So the numbers look really, really good, but you can't put in that moment in time rationally. You can't put in a filter that says what's it going to look like when numbers don't look good, right? You just can't. So they were not doing that. They were just looking at this as being, and then they're creating a narrative to help themselves to say, oh, guess what? Everyone's going to run a business conference using one of these. Everyone's going to do it this, but using one of these, because that plays into that story, right? It plays into that narrative. So you kid yourself, you tell yourself stupid things, right? And when you do that, you just keep going, and then you keep going, and you keep going, and that's the bubble, right? So it's the bubble of deluding yourself, and that was what was happening in this app, right? And the fundamental people funding it and everything. And guess what? Underlying it, there was a huge crypto like a bubble that was building, and everyone knew it's like 90%, 95% of the things that are going on are basically pump and get out before somebody else gets in. Every single VC I talk to that has been open to me about it has said that. That's what they want to get out in time. That's all they want to do. So if you're the person sitting there, and I tell this to young people out there, please don't be the last person sitting there, right? Because you will get done. You will get done. No matter what people say, oh, I'm going to help you with your retirement. If you want 40 years you've got for your retirement, you don't have to piss around with the highest risk asset in town, right? You can get smarter, learn some finance, learn some balance sheet stuff, learn some, P&L. You can actually learn some shit. Even on this platform, you can learn that. So you don't have to do that. But this platform was there. It's a Wild West. It helps with the I have family that actually is in crypto investing. Did not know they're investing, but they're VCs, and they tell me because they've made a couple of investments with big firms that are surviving and consolidating. And I'm telling you, underneath it all, they that there's, on this platform, they wanted to use this platform to pump crypto. Did, right? They did. Almost every smart person that I was here with, at some point, not almost every, 80% that were on here, either left or stayed here and basically let them gaslight them into getting into some crypto experiment, and even change their profile into some, ape or something else, because that's how they basically got to a lot of people. So $11 was nothing, Nicholas, was nothing, right? To get all those crypto customers into their portfolio companies, right? Because a lot of these OpenSea, they're all their portfolio companies. So anyway, I didn't mean to say all that, but I'm on vacation, so I'm a little bit loose. Sorry about
Hey,
that.
Cal.
I
Actually, I had a
love it.
question.
This is
Sorry, do you mind? I had a question for Cal and Tyler. Do you feel that also this houses move is in any way trying to address potentially a global aspect? Because I'm always conscious about when I use products about if I'm obviously this is a more Western, but there are folks like who are not necessarily American or in Europe, UK, etc. Like India, for instance, is a big market, but I don't obviously follow any India rooms. But also when I was in Qatar, I think I mentioned I got blocked. Well, I mean, I'd use a VPN to access Clubhouse to tune into the tech news. So I'm wondering if this helps, if this houses feature helps them maybe. Tyler always mentioned we've seen a lot of stories where Twitter being banned in India, or they want someone there to be able to represent, and they can contact with for moderation, take stuff down. I don't know how much in other countries this is important, and I know this because the other big room I spend a lot of time in is actually a spin out of inspired by this room. Jones, who's Tanzanian, got inspiration from this room, and he runs a really good Tanzania room, which is basically a newsroom, very similar format to this room, but it's become pretty big, and it's a kind of a morning show radio in a market where the news is terrible. Like it's very censored. The government censors everything. I mean, this is a country where we had a COVID denying president and a bunch of other stuff. So being able to discuss news and the quality of discussion is very, very high, and excellent moderation. Essentially, there's a Tyler and a Cheryl there, plus others who are really doing a good job as well. So it makes me wonder about what's happening in other markets that we're not seeing, and maybe this houses the room helps. Clubhouse say, okay, India, you can have your own Clubhouse instance that you can moderate and censor if you want. At Tanzania, you can do the same. I'm
And
wondering if
Warner,
that's
one
playing a factor
one
in.
smart thing that could come out of it for them potentially in this experiment, and if it's a crap take, I see some of the notes down there that they think that I'm giving a crap take. I'm not giving any takes anyway. I'm just talking. So anyway, what I'd say, Warner, is that if they did uh, split this business into, let's say out of all the houses, 5 or 6 of them really caught on fire, and they had a real community going, and maybe it's geographical, right? Maybe it's India, maybe it's a certain segment in India, or maybe it's another country, or maybe it's just Tesla or something. I saw there was a Tesla one, right? Whatever, and whichever house catches fire could probably, in theory, if they're really inventive and they're still driving the kind of crypto pump, if you like, they could say that they could spin out each one, right? Each one could spin out with its own community, its own token, its own piece, and that could be like a big revolutionary thing in their world that they could think they could do. So maybe there's a plan like that, right?
And the other thing is, of course, is that I think it's been mentioned, but the enterprise side. I mean, if you, for example, created a Tesla room or something, maybe that's owned by Tesla, they could start, or as you mentioned, the VC community could, Andreessen Horowitz could decide, okay, we're going to really have our own house for pumping our own investments, whatever you want to do, their own communities. They can start charging that, and they can maybe even help monetize and help pay for mods to kind of run those rooms like in a traditional. I mean, you have to remember that social media used to be a novel thing, but now those are jobs for people to manage a blog or manage a social media account. So that might help drive enterprise use for certain houses that can then be of course that it should also help you moderate and keep out people you don't want. So that's another aspect. I'm sure it's mentioned
Hey,
Madonna.
already, but
this is Stefan. I just wanted to offer one thing that it could present kind of a problem socioeconomically if there's division there, or even worse. I work here in Raleigh, run a business and a nonprofit, and I teach a class at William Peace University downtown where I bring in homeless men and women to be a professor each Wednesday night. It's under their immersive learning program. And there's stuff that kids, it's a seniors honors program. It's things that they can learn from people that you wouldn't normally learn from that is priceless. It's now part of the class, the economic system there, and there's a pedagogy behind it and stuff. So I want to ask, man, could it possibly create some things where there's access for some people, and it's the people who aren't at the table? Could it do something adverse to the underserved in here? That's my question.
It's a great question. The reciprocal point might be that what's going on in Thailand and Iran or Turkey or countries where you can get in some deep shit very quickly for just saying some things, where it still technically could be legal, unlike China where it would never have the chance to be legal. But there's lots of places actually where, and I happen to know, I remember very fondly when some of the biggest rooms were the Thai rooms, and the Thais were using Clubhouse to discuss when to organize the mass protests in Bangkok. And the government became incredibly, understandably concerned about this. And Clubhouse became the biggest thing in Thai media for a moment because of this. So the media was reporting that this is a phenomenon that's happening. And the ministers start coming into Clubhouse. And the point is that the kind of default structure for currently doesn't make it's not optimal for that scenario because optimally for the room organizers, they would love to have a way to be able to organize without the government ministers listening in to their conversations, that you'd have some sort of controls as to who's listening so that you could correctly organize. And because there's a lot of places where this would be an incredibly powerful tool if they had a very organized private way to discuss things organized without having any listeners that they don't want in the room. Never mind speakers, but listeners. And I know you can do that with just a social room, but there's got to be, I imagine that the new format, it might be in part to address Mabwana's question, that this is more meaningful in the international markets in the way that I'm describing. That's my guess as well. But then back to the point that the last speaker just made about does it close doors for some people? Um, I think it simultaneously closes and opens doors in both directions. So there's a really difficult trade-off there. But
For me, I see this very similar to like the cable business. It's like there's this bundling and unbundling and rebundling and bundling and unbundling. At the end of the day, this is software and technology. And in reality, what we need is an open internet that enables privacy for all, that enables you to have this on your website. And so that if you want to be in a conversation, you go to that website, and then that website has self-sovereignty in terms of determining how one can sign up, whether it signs up anonymously with full privacy, etc., etc. And this just becomes a feature of the open internet, and we get back what we were supposed to have in the beginning, because every single thing we say here is being recorded, fed back, and passed by the powers that be, including the Chinese government, who will have access through the technology that is, underpinning Clubhouse. So one way or another, I just feel that these are features that in an era of the internet, which is dominated by network effects, that is owned by those who have asymmetric capital, and eventually these tools will be open sourced, and eventually there will be business models that will emerge for how one maintains the open internet, and that is likely to be in with some form of cryptographic economics.
Yo, yo, yo! Shout out to the deep state.
Well,
Anyone
what,
know if this house feature has a payment feature that the creator can attach to? Whether is it a free house or you have to pay
No,
to enter the
it
house?
doesn't. It
Not
doesn't.
yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
there's still one feature opportunity that I've said from the beginning is the holy grail opportunity, which we know to be true because YouTube did it successfully, which was in the early days of YouTube and video streaming. There was a dozen competitors, and YouTube buried the competition. And if you ask them why, they would tell you for two reasons. One, they optimized for speed, but secondly, but perhaps more importantly, they didn't force themselves as the destination. They enabled embedding of the player on anybody's website. So they partnered with WordPress and Blogger and everybody to allow you to embed in one click their player on your blog. So now they provided a platform technology tool that enriched your website and enriched your brand on your website, on your terms and everything else. So I'm still a bit surprised that Clubhouse hasn't done that. They easily can, technically, to make the room embeddable outside of the Clubhouse app so that you're not forcing people to come to the app. And that, by the way, it could replace all comments on all websites. You could still have comment sections, but wouldn't you rather have a conversation at the end of an article with the person who wrote the article or somebody from the organization or the publication, and ideally the subjects or objects of the article in the room talking about
Sounds
that?
like you've just identified the buyer. The buyer is Twilio or Twilio.
Well, I
I
think the
just
problem can't be logged
the,
in one place at once, so you have to keep logging back in if you're on another device. So I think what you're saying, Tyler, would address that issue to some extent.
So Tyler, that works. That works if the piece of content, right, that's embedded is really appropriate, right? So, so how that's the challenge, right? So, it needs good content being generated, good relevant content that you can index being generated in that people can find very quickly. But and I think there was a clip thing they tried to do that, but I don't know if anyone even uses that. But you basically find that little piece of content. So out of a 3 hour tech newsroom, that could be like a 10-minute debate, real robust debate between Ben and Nicholas, right? Which constructively is like probably the highest quality point of view on something, right? Because they're just debating it, working it, asking tough questions, and that piece of content is gold, right? That one piece of content. How do you find that content and get it, and then somebody embeds it inside, let's say, an economist, an
yeah.
economist article that has some comments, right? I know they try
Here,
to do that, but
here's
inside that, but that would be valuable if that could happen.
so here's what I would propose: that at the end of any news article, Newsweek, CNN, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all of them, thousands of them, TechCrunch, the Next Web, you name it, that at the end of the article, there's a social audio room, a clubhouse room, and there's also a replay. So there's a live room of people that just got done reading the article who want to discuss it, which might be moderated by somebody they've hired, and which they can do relatively cheaply actually. And then
Could
they
be the
have
author.
right, it could be, yeah, but then also they might kick off the room. They launch the article. The article launches. The launching of the article is itself sort of a teaser for the conversation they're going to have with the people in the article. They do that for as long as it seems relevant or interesting, and then they wrap it. They save that as a replay. They might have 2 or 3 or 4 different replays depending on how big the article is, and it might be author of art journalist number one, and speaks with one of the subjects. Author number two speaks with a different subject. There's live Q&A and everything else, and they each go on for an hour. And then there's the actual live room with the other punters who just like yourself who just got done reading the article who want to discuss it. Which, by the way, that's the most natural thing I do when I read a good article is I want to discuss it with some people who also want to discuss it. So
Yeah,
I can't
No,
think
I
of
agree.
I,
I
That's
love that
such a good
idea.
proposition.
And you
Yeah.
could
Do you
do
remember
fiction too.
AOL?
Like it wouldn't have to be
AOL back in
articles,
the
it could
days.
be stories or fiction as well.
but I can't think of a better way to have 10,000 concurrent rooms going live all the time on every
You're
topic you can imagine.
100% right. We discussed this a long time ago, but the
Yeah.
issue is who's going to
Who's going to what?
Nicholas, you're out.
I said, who's going to support the infrastructure? That when we discussed it last time,
Right.
it was, in order to do that, someone's got to store the information, and then there's got to be a business model behind it.
Yeah. I think
And
I think it's a semi-enterprise version where the big tech blogs who benefit from this at some point would end up paying for it. I think they would find tremendous value from it, especially if the audio was searchable, or if they felt like they get a license to the content because they're doing it on their blog or whatever.
I think
Uh,
you need to in the data though. So what you're saying, the embeddings need to have that crumb or that paper trail so you could follow, oh, here's another discussion and not have to necessarily go into the app. So I think
well, by
you're
the
on
way, when you tell Newsweek, not only can you have it on your website, on every new article if you so choose, every time you have one of those rooms, it'll exist in the native Clubhouse app in the hallway. So you could have 10 different Newsweek rooms going, 10 different USA Today rooms going, 10 different, and you'd have tens of thousands of rooms about everything you could think of. So I think just it would be a way for you to discover Newsweek articles inside of the mother Clubhouse app, which is what they want. They want you to start to associate them with, you know, good conversations about things. By the way, that is if you go hang out on Madison Avenue, you'll quickly learn that being the center point of conversations is what every brand's trying to do. McDonald's is trying to own particular keywords, as is Coca-Cola is trying to own the word happiness in every conversation about the word happiness. I know that sounds ridiculous, but those of you who have uh, firsthand dealings in these issues know exactly what I'm talking about. And so
Hey, Howard,
yes,
just do it.
yeah,
So, uh, I love this train of thought. I have one thing that I wanted to interject that was brought up yesterday by Aram, I believe. She had listened to a room that was unfortunately not recorded, but there is a blog about it. They're completely reconstructing or redesigning, engineering the back end of Clubhouse right now, taking it, I believe, off of the Agora um, software that they or hardware, whatever that they originally used to build Clubhouse. Do you think possibly that's part of the reason why they haven't gone and done all of these things that you're talking
yeah,
about?
could be,
And considering all of that,
yeah. And by the way, I want to be clear. I want to be very careful not to sound like I'm lecturing Clubhouse. They clearly know way more about what's happening in the back end than all of us combined, and I give them the benefit of the doubt all the way to the end, and I defer all knowledge of anything to the team at Clubhouse. They're not stupid individuals; they're very smart individuals, and this is the nature of startups. Is sometimes people think they have good ideas, that there's very good reasons why they don't exist, and I'm painfully aware of that. So I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing Clubhouse in the least, because I don't. I would never pretend to know what's really going on in the back end, and I assume that they actually have a really good sense for how to take things. So I just want to say that because it really irks me when I hear people who've never built a startup pretend like they understand how these things work. I have been involved in building a startup. I know how these things work, and it's oftentimes very different. What's going on behind the curtain is very different from what people would assume. So I'm
well, I
not
would
going to assume what's going on behind the curtain. So I just want to make that clear.
so would Can be that they're not making any moves right now because it's too early in terms of business model development. They're still trying to see what the market is gravitating towards. At least that would be my impression at this stage. I think it would be too early to kind of limit your options. And
Alexandra's in the audience. I'd love for her to come up and weigh in. She had some great insights to share.
Invite is sent.
Yeah, I had a room like a week and a half ago on this when I first was in the house, like was first invited to a bunch of houses.
That's right. I got my application from you. I remember that.
Yeah. And Paul was in the room that I started. So I started a room. I was like, oh, hey, does anybody start rooms? So I started a room and with a friend of mine, and we were like, okay, now what? And so we started talking, and then we realized you could open up the rooms to the public, and it grew really fast. It was a huge room. It was many hundred people. I mean, like it was like 600 people or so in there, 600, 700. We were talking about it. Paul was kind enough to come in and tell his perspective as well. I told him, I said, can you just come up and answer some of these questions? So he was very kind and did that. And then since then, I've been talking to several people within the Clubhouse team about it. And so I thought rather than conjecture, maybe you guys would want to hear what Clubhouse has to say about it. So because that's really useful, isn't it? So so the houses, what from Paul's tweet stream, the houses are, which is after the room that I had, um, the um, the houses have been something that is long built because he wants to keep Clubhouse something that can be very small and intimate. That part I think is revising history because we remember how the rollout happened, and the rollout was specifically designed to maximize people coming in, and the floodgates opened. Right, it wasn't really a controlled opening when they expanded. They moved from invite only to opening up to large country groups and then all of Android, and it turned a lot of Clubhouse from a like this community. It was a forced interaction community to another population with lots of bubbles, and that actually ended up being something of a problem. But it did give rise to this huge amount these influencers. There was like a level of creators, influencers, and aggregators that have developed now on this app, and with a different amount of relative power and control of the followers that exist on this particular platform or any platform, right? So the huge amount of people allowed individuals within this particular community or large population to monetize independently of Clubhouse. Now what they're doing with the houses is returning to an invite only environment. The result of that, unfortunately, has been a few of the major influencers leaving because some of it is ridiculous, like hurt feelings. That's crazy. But like they didn't get asked to be in the beta test, and so they left, and that's silly to me. There's a lot of confusion about what is the role of clubs versus houses is going to be, because if you spent all this time building up a club, um, are you now obligated to open up a house because the house application has now been made public? They do intend for everyone to have a house if they want it. But of course, this is what happened with the clubs. It used to be that you had to apply to a club. And then you couldn't change the name. So you had to think really carefully about what you want your club to be called. And because there were so few clubs, people had fewer. They had to talk to people that they ordinarily wouldn't talk to. So we had a bunch of discussions where people are forced to socialize and to have interactions with people they ordinarily wouldn't have interactions with, simply because that is the way that it was set up, right? It was set up so that people could talk to people, even though his tweet stream says that it was, about
having conversations with your friends and friends of friends. That isn't actually what made Clubhouse powerful. It was this ability to gather people from all different aspects of life and perspectives and have this conversation that you would never be able to have in real life. But then with the advent of growing clubs, right, everybody started trying to pull people into their club. And a lot of these spontaneous conversations didn't happen. So now with the houses, the idea is to return to this friends of friends idea. However, my concern is that it is going to force people once again to either choose between general conversations where you may hear opinions that you don't like or agree with, but are forced to listen to. And instead, you're going to go back to your small group where there's a ton of apps that already do that, where you can be with people that are already people that you're used to being around. You hear the same opinions and the same ideas, and you can see a little bit of that happening in some areas of Clubhouse where we have the same conversations over and over with the same people. There isn't really this, it's not about creating drama, really. It's about forced interaction. The drama part is one of the things that they're hoping to mitigate with these houses. So it's not supposed to be an exclusive thing at the end. It is right now. I don't know how long it's going to be that there's this invitation only thing. The concerns right now are, how does the blocking function carry over to the houses? Because right now, if you're in a room in a house, if you've blocked, unless the person who created the room has blocked the person, has blocked someone from coming into the room, anybody can come in, and there's an issue of safety because there's a lot of people that have had not good experiences, even in-person stalking and things like that. The ability to keep people out of your space is actually a very important one. Not to keep out ideas from your space, but to keep out people who are threatening, and the inability to control who's even in a house and in a room doesn't really mitigate that at this point. The other issue is the new age drop that I guess has been talked about for a while, but the age is now dropped, I think, to 12. And concerns about predatory behavior that can be
Wait,
more
wait,
hidden.
Alexandra, anybody above 12 can join Clubhouse now?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
that's
Well,
right.
It
that
is
Like,
a
like
huge issue.
not just the
It's a huge issue
houses, but just
in
Clubhouse,
general.
you mean?
In
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 general.
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 Oh
And
my
Hmm.
there's nothing
goodness.
Yeah.
marking. There's
When
nothing
did that
marking
happen?
them or anything. And if you have a room of 300 people,
It
you're
was
not
just
going to go through.
announced.
Yeah, you're not going to go through every single what do you
Profile.
call it, like profile in the room and say, oh wait, you're underage or whatever, and no one's monitoring the profiles either. So the opportunities for predatory behavior are have compounded extraordinarily. The difference between having an age limit, and I just had a conversation with the director of, or the head of creators and partnerships about this yesterday. The difference between having an app that has an age limit of 18 and a 12-year-old sneaking on or being there with their parent is, it's a very different set of liability and risk than somebody who's allowed on. And what you see on other apps is, there's no reason why it wouldn't happen here. We see young girls like on TikTok being groomed, and here, they're going to be like, oh, set up a cash app and you can,
So,
and
Alexandra, can I just, I'm sorry, but I'm just totally shocked, like, because I haven't been on the app, like, physically, like, I've been listening to replays. Right now, in our audience, there could be 12-year-olds
right
legally.
now, right
Correct.
now.
Yep. That
Oh
could
my
be.
goodness. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a whole different responsibility.
Yeah, because then it changes the way you have to speak because you want to be conscious about around children. So
Tyler, no more
Well, so the
swearing.
thing is, people are not responsible, and these children, I mean, like, there was one toxic room where a child was speaking on the stage. It's extremely disheartening and disconcerting.
I mean, this is a massive problem, honestly, and I've mentioned this as the thought, I think, originally was, well, kids are getting on it anyway. They're on Twitter, right? And I said, but I've seen the Twitter spaces. There's a range of things that happen from, some bullying that happens. The other not great thing that happens is the kids try to emulate the adults in order to feel like they fit in. It happens a lot in like the NFT creator spaces that happen on Twitter, and that is extremely disturbing. Where they start, trying to, uh, you know, pretend that they both understand and partake of adult behavior in order to fit into communities. It's not good. I don't think that's something that they want to take from Twitter. This is really, some of the spaces in here, depending on who you are, you may or may not have been in some of these spaces. I go into all sorts of spaces. I see some of you guys in there, so some of you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly what you're
But
talking about.
yeah, and some of these spaces are, they're super aggressive. There's extreme amounts of bullying. There's also some that are extremely ribald. They're not appropriate for kids. They're fine for adults, right? But if adults, first of all, have problems with bullying on the app, that is a bad situation. But can you put a 12-year-old in with somebody who's, 25 and getting applause for being funny to this, a 12-year-old whose self-esteem is like already fairly shot? So, I mean, I think that the responsibilities here and the risks are, not matching, right? The responsibility really is to make sure that this stays like look, there's adults that have free and open conversation that is not moderated. If you have a not moderated content space, and I said, look, you're going to have to come in and start moderating, and that's going to break your section 230. What are you going to do about that? So if you have an unmoderated space of conversation, it is your obligation to make sure that it is limited to people who are adults. If you want to moderate that space so that it's appropriate for young children, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that means that you're obligated to moderate it, which would impact your liability in other areas of the space. So, it's a really tangled issue. And with the
Alexandra,
advent,
can I
of
ask you a
course.
question on that? Just a little bit. So, um, this is fascinating, and I know there's going to be a point of view because I know the Clubhouse community, and I love that normal conversation we have where people say their parents are going to have to monitor, and it's all good. It's social media. That's one side, and the parental risk. Maybe Jennifer has a perspective. She's still here. But I like. Do you see lawsuits or people, moderators being sued, club owners being sued, or by parents, by whoever, and maybe they won't, hold up in court or whatever. But do you see action like that taking place if you get a kid that comes on and
Look, in tech news
something happens to
yesterday,
them?
it was made clear that Visa were responsible for child pornography on MindGeek and Pornhub. So it's absolutely, the precedent is there.
Yeah, I mean, there's the liability right now is kind of all over the place because Section 230 doesn't necessarily protect you from trafficking, right? That's the whole thing that happened with FOSTA and SESTA, is that there's a separate category of crime that is not applicable. Like the section 230 was intended to protect the platform from particularly First Amendment issues and untrue facts, right? That's what section 230 was intended for. This is a crime that is perpetuated by the platform itself. So it looks like, and this is the whole thing that happened with OnlyFans and the credit card companies that wanted to cut off the access to OnlyFans because they were really uncomfortable being now with adult entertainment and stuff like that. All of that is a huge, open, scary area. It is an area that looks like it is not. It doesn't. It's not protected by Section 230 and shouldn't be. But that's because the action is on the platform, right? The platform did something to allow this or fail to protect against it, and that's because you are still required to moderate your onboarding. So if they're deciding not to moderate onboarding, right, in any manner, and they're just letting anybody on, and it doesn't matter what age you are,
Okay, so
then
Alexandra, there are three layers. Yeah, can I just yeah, that was so helpful. Can I just go two more layers, just three layers? So there's the platform, which is Clubhouse, and the responsibility of when they onboard people and telling them what their risks are, etc. So I get that, and if they're not doing that, that's a certain responsibility on Clubhouse. There's another thing they've now got. They've got houses and they've got clubs. Maybe houses in the future and not clubs, whichever way that goes. But they've got clubs, and therefore there are people who are either leading or running those clubs, and then within those clubs you've got rooms. So uh, could Clubhouse just say, look, we've just opened up the platform, that's great, we'll do our like minimal onboarding, tell the 12-year-olds not to do stupid things, etc., whatever, right? And we'll do that. But the real responsibility lies on the people that set up the spaces or the houses, because we've given them so much autonomy now. We've given them all the tools. I'm just saying this is what Clubhouse could say. We're giving them all the tools. They've got it. They run that little space in this. It's like they own a shop in a mall. Okay. Whatever happens in that shop owner, Best Buy's got to figure that out. It's not my problem as Simon, whatever, Simon, the person that's leased them the shop, right? The shop that, inside Best Buy, the CEO of Best Buy, the people there, they're responsible for building the code, making sure that there are certain safety levels. A kid doesn't go in there and get attacked by an employee or something else, right? And they're responsible for that. They've got to figure that out. And of course, there are criminal things, and the police get involved. But so in this case, from Clubhouse's perspective, they can just say, you know what, we've onboarded people. Now there are these houses and these clubs that people run, right? And they set up their rules, and we'll give them all the tools to figure that out. And we've given them. It's up to them. And then if something happens in there, you take it up with you can sue the club, you can sue the house, right? And they're off the hook.
No. So the difference in your analogy is that there is a legal contract between the mall and the shop, wherein the mall no longer has the ownership, responsibility, liability of things within the shop, and the shop owner, or the
Got it.
shop
Got it.
lessee. Right, there's a difference there. So
Yeah, no, I
here,
got.
yeah, you're just renting a room. You're not even renting, right? They just say, go ahead, take this room, and you say, okay, I'm gonna put sell stuff here, but they don't really have any legal obligations that have been placed on them. Now, to the extent that the house or club or anything like that actually has some control that the platform no longer has, then we have that sort of argument. To the extent that any individual moderator or people controlling a house see behavior and permit it, and don't report it, then there may be some obligation there. Remember, kids are a very different area from something like defamation or untrue facts, right? It's very different. So if you have a house and you are restricting people who can come in, then there's an argument to be made, right, that you had the ability to restrict children, or you had the ability to restrict or boot out predators, and you didn't, right? So now you have to monitor what happens within your house the same way you need to monitor what happens in your club. So what I think is going to happen is that the people who are running clubs may not want people to open up rooms that they're not part of, where they can't see the content, because they're the ones that gave authority to other people. I think it might be the same thing with houses, where if you decide you want to control access, then you take on a different amount of responsibility than if you're just like, I'm a house holding these kinds of things, anybody is welcome. And you're saying, I'm not monitoring anything that's happening in here. Well, then you're like, the Nevada house. If you guys have been in there, that's just a mess. But but that
I'm
but
member
that
number 15, by the way. I can explain to you
of
why it's a
Nevada.
mess.
Oh my God, I don't know what's happening there. I think the owners have abdicated, and so
There's
now
only
it's
there's only one owner, by the way. There's the only real owner in a house is the person who started the room, who has the ultimate control. So I mean, member number 2, member number 3, member 15, which I am, we don't have any more control than member 500. So it's the one person who started the house, who, by the way, ended up spending more time in the public rooms anyway. And this came up in the room that you and I were in just yesterday. That apparently, he gave out like 3 invitations to everybody without limit, and everybody invited 3 people, and now you have a room that is not small at all, or a house that's not small at all, and it doesn't even really go that often. But why I'm on this, because we were in that room together yesterday. I agreed with everything you said yesterday, and now I'm hearing like different things. I thought you didn't like the idea of houses based on what you
I
said yesterday.
those were my this is a lot of what I'm saying about that, about the difference in structures between the houses and the clubs. That is what yesterday was my opinion. This is basically a lot of what they have told me. My concerns are still there, right? In my personal opinion about the houses, I'm not a huge fan. I think that what they're trying to do now is grow. They're trying to figure out how to grow again, how to make Clubhouse, because it's faced a lot of attrition, and the problem, it's not really as much a problem as they think it is, because it hasn't been moving to one specific platform. It's creators primarily. It's the creators, influencers, and aggregators figuring out which one they are, and then seeing who owns the followers. This has been going on for a year, and this is actually a really important battle, right? Because it's a different answer for different people. But those who realize their followers belong to the platform are coming back and doing more things with the platform, because that is what gives them power, as opposed to the creators who are the ones who actually own their followers and can port them off of Clubhouse, in which case, they have more power relative to any independent platform. That's a whole separate argument. But the issue with the houses is trying to create exclusivity again. It's really just, creating this sort of antagonism for against people, right? Of like, what are you in? What are you in? It's not really creating a great benefit. There's a lot of conflict between what the houses do and what the clubs do. And the people who have spent a lot of time creating clubs are resentful of having to create another house platform, or else face another conflict that their club and their club rooms are now competing with houses and house rooms, sometimes with the same content and people. So it's a very difficult issue. The other thing is that influencers who have self monetized, because the way that Clubhouse originally tried to monetize didn't work out, which was that sort of sponsorship experiment. The way that influencers have decided to monetize independently depends on having spaces that have large amounts of people. So if we balkanize further, then those influencers who are making a living, and creators, et cetera, who are making a living monetizing independently, by using those spaces, or separately charging admission to clubs. There's all sorts of things. People are charging admission to houses now. Again, if you charge admission to a house, your liability is much higher. But it's the same problem, where the influencers and creators who are just running a business essentially, via this app, which hadn't offered them another way to monetize, are not going to be able to do that, because now the audience is going to be split. So it's going to cause, I think, a lot more problems than it helps. I think if this was what they wanted to do originally, that's what the club should have been. But trying to create more and more interior separations that are exclusive and make people want to be part of it, I think is problematic for the community that exists right here.
Alexandra, what's your solution? You laid that out really well. I'm curious as to what you're suggesting.
I don't. I mean, it's not my app. I'm not. I don't have an answer for how to make this work. But I do think that what the biggest mistake they made in the past was this. Not controlling the flow of people in, so that communities could stay intact without like forcing a surge that when you growing a community, as we all know, is very, very difficult. The biggest issue with growing a community is growing it too fast. When you grow a community too fast, it becomes a population, and the population has no cohesion to each other, only to the person who is running that population. That has no allegiance. It's something that independently we see in Binance and has caused problems for them. So what I wish they had done is grown it more slowly. But that said, we have this population here. What I would like them to do is limit the opportunities for people to be in a bunch of different spaces. And I like that creating spaces where, like, even here, when I disagree with somebody, I appreciate the opportunity to hear their perspective. I don't think that we're going to have another experience got on this app, and like when I did, I remember having an argument, like, and I will not forget this, that I had an argument with Tyrese about whether or not life coach is a real thing. Like, that was just it was a crazy thing, it was just a crazy discussion that I would never have in real life. But on this app, a lot of that stuff was possible, and the opportunity for chance encounters, for like, these accidental circumstantial meetings that result in incredible things, like businesses have been started here, and people have met people that have launched them personally and professionally in completely new directions, and more than that, when they haven't, when previously they've only ever heard people talk about things one way in their own social group. They've had the opportunity in these kinds of spaces to hear things from a completely different perspective, which allowed them to think about things in a completely new way. And I think, having these separations are, all they're doing is eroding that incredibly valuable aspect. That is one of the most valuable aspects of Clubhouse. And I just don't want to see that eroded. So I would probably not do the houses, honestly. And I would look at how many rooms a club could have simultaneously, and see if we can kind of start bringing things back to where, even if there's a huge number of people, at least people are able to interact with each other. That's one of the benefits of these large stages, is that you can really have a conversation with people that you would never have a conversation with otherwise, even if they're your polar opposite. It's enlightening in a lot of ways.
And you can talk to kids now, so it's all good, right? I
Okay.
mean, this is shocking to me. That no, I
Well,
mean,
you could
I
always
still
talk
I
to
mean,
follow.
talking
kids.
to kids is a
You could
whole other
always talk
issue.
to kids. There was no age verification. There's never been age verification.
But they
No,
did
but
they did have something where it used to be, like, I don't know what the process is now, but when I onboarded, it had to be your real name, and you did have to say
Nope.
that you were over 18.
Nope.
You
Nope.
don't
As a
do
matter
that
of fact,
now?
I
Yeah,
know
I know.
because there
Now
was
now you don't have
gamer
to have your
there
real
they
name.
were gamer rooms, and my son and his gamer buddies would go to that gamer room. So I know there, and just so you know, supposedly, purportedly, there is age verification now, and there's what's called a protected profile. So if you're a teen, it it flags you so that people know you're a teen.
I don't think so, because I was in a room with somebody who was a teenager, and it didn't actually. Wait, are
Okay,
you
yeah,
saying
just look
Didn't
it
fear
up.
say at
flags you? It
all.
doesn't flag
There's a
you?
protected profile that tells you that you're a teen, and supposedly it flags you so you can't go into, like, it doesn't allow. Um, so I'm just going off of an article I read, but we could probably check on the clubhouse rules. But it says it doesn't allow an adult and a teen to be in a room alone.
That is incorrect. I actually witnessed that teen, and I have her name. She's flowed in several different rooms. There was no way we could tell she was in teen until she admitted. And we couldn't identify when we looked at her profile at all.
Yeah,
Okay, I found it. It's on the clubhouse rules, and it says
but they
there's a
don't
protected
enforce their rule.
profile.
They don't
Yeah,
That is
enforce.
very
absolutely,
true. They don't enforce the
absolutely.
rules.
It's well, again, like I said, my son and his gamer buddies were on there, like, I mean, almost as early as I was. So early on, because there was some gamer, and there still are some gamer rooms. I'm sure if we go in there, I don't know if it flags them as protected profiles, but here on the clubhouse rules, it says that teens and adults are restricted from being in private rooms together. Teens can only send and receive direct messages from people they are connected with on Clubhouse.
I know I happen to see somebody that I happen to know as a teen in the Roosevelt room, which, if anybody knows those rooms, those are not for kids. and and
That
there's
was the
nothing
room I
flagging.
saw her in. That was the
Yeah,
room.
that's
Way